The bank manager's face went completely white. His hands trembled as he reached for the phone. "Lock the front doors," he told his assistant, "and call the police now." He looked at me like I had just handed him a live grenade instead of my dead grandfather's old passbook. The same passbook my mother threw in the trash just yesterday, calling it worthless junk that should have stayed buried with him. She was so sure it meant nothing. Turns out, some secrets refuse to stay in the grave, and some of them have teeth. My name is Jenna, and I have learned that the truth is patient. Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I would love to know who is part of our community. I did not flinch when the sirens started wailing outside the glass doors of the First Coastal Bank. Most people would have had a panic attack. They would have stuttered or tried to explain themselves to the security guard who was suddenly hovering 3 feet away. I did not. I just sat in the high-backed leather chair and checked my watch. Precision is my job. As a civil engineer, I deal in load-bearing walls and stress points. If you do not respect the math, the whole thing falls down. My family never respected the math. They preferred the illusion of strength, while the foundation was turning to sand. When the officers walked in, looking for a suspect, I did not wait for them to ask questions. I opened my professional leather folder and slid a pre-prepared stack of documents across the manager's desk. It was all there. My identification, my grandfather Frank's death certificate, a copy of his will, naming me as the sole executor. Stephanie had presented a fraudulent power of attorney and an outdated will to the probate court, moving fast to seize temporary control before the real documents could be verified, and a forensic copy of the passbook he had hidden in the secret compartment of his handcrafted clockwork box. The manager, Theodore, was still shaking. He looked at the police, then back at me. I could see the gears turning in his head. This was not some sentimental granddaughter looking for a few spare dollars. This was a professional, auditing a crime scene. I hit record on my phone, setting it face up on the desk. "Let us be clear," I said. My voice was clinical. "You did not call the police because I am a criminal. You called them because this account has been flagged for a decade. Specifically, it was flagged because my mother, Stephanie, tried to forge my grandfather's signature to empty it while he was still alive." Theodore swallowed hard, his eyes darting to the lead officer. He nodded slowly. "The account was flagged. In 2015, he admitted, a woman claiming power of attorney tried to wire $4,800,000 to a construction shell company. The signatures were an 80% match, but the verification system caught the inconsistencies. We denied access, but the person vanished before we could investigate further. I did not cry. I did not ask why my own mother would rob a dying man. I already knew the answer. In our family, affection was a subscription, and I had stopped footing the bill years ago. I simply looked at the officer and pointed to the logbook. My mother and my brother Tyler are currently at the coastal mansion selling off my grandfather's furniture before the body is even in the ground. They think I am the weak, sentimental one. They think I am just a dreamer who draws lines on paper. I leaned forward, my shadow falling over the manager's desk like a structural report. But I notice things. I notice when the foundation is rotting. And right now, I am here to reclaim the $4,800,000 my grandfather built to keep me safe from them. This is not a family drama. It is an accounting. And I have all the receipts. The air at the main coastal mansion did not smell like morning. It smelled like salt spray, expensive perfume, and the heavy, cloying scent of the mayonnaise-filled catering Stephanie had ordered for the reception. My mother, Stephanie, stood by the mahogany buffet, holding court with a group of real estate contractors, while my grandfather Frank's body was barely cold. To her, This was not a funeral, it was a networking event. I remembered the moment clearly. I was holding the final architectural blueprint Frank had handed me. 2 weeks before he died, a masterpiece of sustainable coastal design that he had spent his final years perfecting. It was his last gift to me. Stephanie walked over, snatched the delicate paper from my hands, and barely glanced at it. "This is unrealistic junk, Jenna," she said, her voice dripping with that familiar condescension. Frank was not himself at the end. He was a dreamer who lost his grip on the math. Before I could even protest, she walked into his study and fed the blueprint into the paper shredder. She told me to stop being sentimental and go sit at the secondary table with the distant cousins. I sat there in the back of the room watching Tyler brag to a group of investors about the $1,200,000 seed investment Stephanie had given him for his hedge fund. She had bled the estate dry, liquidating Grandpa's house and vintage cars to fund Tyler's failures, never realizing that the true fortune, the millions she called junk, was still locked away. We all knew the truth. It was not an investment, it was a bailout for his high-stakes gambling debts. Meanwhile, I had worked 3 jobs to pay for my own civil engineering degree because Stephanie told me they could not afford to help with my little drawing hobby. I did not scream. I did not try to save the shredded paper. To my family, I was just the quiet, compliant daughter who accepted the scraps they tossed my way. But they did not understand the physics of my silence. My silence was not a choice, it was a cage. I grew up in a house that looked like a fortress but was built on a landslide. I had been the silent investor in their version of family for 30 years, footing the emotional bill while they overspent on arrogance. I learned early on that in our home, any sign of strength was treated as a structural flaw that Stephanie would immediately move to demolish. It was like being a building with deep, invisible cracks in the foundation. You stay perfectly still, not because you are weak, but because you are terrified that if you move even an inch, the entire ceiling will come down on your head. This was not a breakdown. It was the calculated stillness of a survivor, waiting for the load-bearing walls of their lies to finally fail. As I watched them divide Frank's estate like vultures, I realized my compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for far too long. The foundation was finally ready to crumble, and I was the only one who knew exactly where to find the detonator. The digital fallout was faster than the actual storm. My phone would not stop buzzing with notifications, the screen glowing with a harsh, clinical blue light that matched the temperature of my blood. Stephanie and Tyler were not content with just erasing my grandfather's physical legacy. They wanted to erase my reputation, too. I sat in my dark kitchen and watched as a photo appeared on my feed. It was Stephanie and Tyler at a 5-star steakhouse in Portland, clinking glasses of champagne that cost more than my monthly rent. The caption read, "Celebrating the new era of the family business. Sometimes you have to cut the dead weight to see the stars." They had not even waited for the funeral flowers to wilt before tagging me in a post that essentially called me a leech on their success. A few minutes later, the direct text arrived. It was from my mother. "Jenna, we have already discussed this with the lawyers. You are not mentioned in the primary accounts because you never contributed a single cent to the growth of this family. I am sending $500 to your account for gas money. Take it, move away, and stop embarrassing us with your research and your questions. Let it go." $500. That was the price they placed on 32 years of my life. That was the settlement for the millions they were currently siphoning out of a dead man's estate. I did not cry. I did not type out a long, emotional paragraph about how much they had hurt me. I did not ask why. In that moment, I rubbed my eyes, trying to summon regret, but there was only clarity. This was not a family breakdown. It was a balance sheet, and I was finally ready to settle the accounts. I did not answer a single message. Instead, I opened my laptop and started a new encrypted spreadsheet. If Stephanie wanted to play at being a ruthless contractor, she should have remembered that I am an engineer I understand the mechanics of collapse. I knew exactly which load-bearing lies were holding up their luxury lifestyle. By 1 o'clock in the morning, I was not just Jenna, the overlooked daughter. I was the lead investigator in my own private war. I called a former colleague who now ran a boutique forensic auditing firm. I did not offer him a story, I offered him a contract. I need every permit, every wire transfer, and every forged signature Stephanie has ever put on paper, I told him. My compassion has been a luxury. They have overdrafted for years, and tonight I am closing the line of credit. I spent the rest of the night mapping out their vulnerabilities. While they were busy celebrating at a high-end restaurant, I was busy calculating the weight of the evidence that was about to bring their world down. They were not shocked by what they had done. They were shocked that I'd stopped playing along. Inside my laptop glowed with a different kind of sunrise, the kind made of facts, numbers, and quiet retribution. I returned to the coastal mansion under the cover of a thick Maine fog that swallowed the shoreline whole. The house felt like a hollow shell, without Frank, but I was not there for sentiment. I was there for the master blueprint. I walked past the study, where Stephanie had shredded my grandfather's final design, my footsteps silent on the hardwood floors. My destination was the clockwork box, a massive, intricate mechanical device Frank had spent 30 years building. To my mother, it was just a piece of unrealistic junk. To an engineer, it was a masterpiece of hidden gears and calculated tension. I pressed the sequence of brass levers Frank had taught me when I was 10 years old. The box groaned, a series of internal locks, disengaging with clinical precision, and a hidden compartment at the base slid open. Inside was not more drawings. It was a black leather ledger and a final letter, addressed only to me. As I read his words, I felt the air leave my lungs. Frank had not been a confused old man during those last few years. He had been a man, trapped in a prison of his own making, the prison of a father who loves a daughter he knows is rotten to the core. I realized then that Frank's silence had not been weakness. It was a silent, agonizing regret. He had spent a decade as a guardian, watching from the corner of the room. As Stephanie dismantled his legacy, piece by piece, he had been torn between the hope that his daughter would finally choose compassion and the cold, hard evidence that she never would. He wrote that his cancer diagnosis was his final deadline the moment he realized he had to stop being a father and start being a judge. He had documented every stolen cent and every forged permit in that ledger, waiting for the one person he knew would have the precision to finish the work. I took the ledger to my auditor that same night. We sat in a room that smelled of burnt coffee and cold facts. This was not revenge, it was a forensic audit. 2 hours in, the auditor looked up at me, his face grim. "Jenna, it is worse than the bank records suggested," he said. "Your mother did not just siphon funds. She established a fake construction firm, Coastal Foundations, limited liability company. Over the past 5 years, she laundered $1,200,000 through that shell company to pay off Tyler's gambling debts and hidden creditors. The kill shot came at 3 o'clock in the morning. We found the digital copies of the withdrawal forms. The signature at the bottom was a clumsy, heavy-handed trace of my grandfather's name. As a civil engineer, I have spent my life studying Frank's handwriting on thousands of blueprints. I knew every curve of his capital F and every slant of his lowercase k. The signature on these forms was a structural failure. It was a lie that could not hold its own weight. My mother and my brother Tyler were not just ungrateful, they were criminals. They had built their luxury lifestyle on a foundation of felony fraud, and I now held the master key to their demolition. Calm, factual, lethal. The groundbreaking ceremony for the Oceanic Rise development was a masterpiece of ego. Stephanie had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on a heated tent, crystal chandeliers, and a guest list that looked like a who is who of Maine's political and financial elite. She stood on a temporary stage, a silver-plated shovel in her hand, beaming, as she described a luxury future built on a $3,200,000 foundation of theft. Beside her, Tyler straightened his silk tie, looking like the prince of a kingdom he had not earned. I did not wait for an invitation. I walked through the center of the crowd, the rhythmic clicking of my professional heels, cutting through the ambient jazz music. I was not alone. Behind me were 4 men in dark suits, federal marshals, who had spent the last 48 hours reviewing my encrypted spreadsheet and the ledger from Frank's clockwork box. Their investigation had moved beyond family theft into interstate money laundering and felony tax evasion through Tyler's shell companies. This was no longer just about Grandpa's legacy. It was a federal takedown. Stephanie saw me, and her smile did not just fade, it curdled. She stepped off the stage, hissing in a voice meant only for me. Jenna, you pathetic dreamer, get out. You are embarrassing the family. I told you to take the gas money and vanish. I am not here as your daughter, Stephanie, I said. My voice was clinical, carrying across the silent room like a structural failure report. I am here as the executor of Frank's estate, and I am here to tell you that the inspection is over. I handed her the forensic audit. As she scrolled through the evidence of the $1,200,000 laundered through coastal foundations, her hands began to shake. The once arrogant Stephanie collapsed to her knees. In her designer gown, her face a mask of terror. Jenna, please, she whispered, her eyes red, as she looked at the cameras. We are family. Think of your brother's future. We can settle this privately. We can give you a seat at the table. I looked down at her and felt nothing but the cold clarity of a finished balance sheet. You do not understand, Stephanie. I stopped being family the moment you fed my grandfather's life's work into a paper shredder. I watched the crowd pull away from her, the silence deepening. This was the reality of her world. Stephanie's power had never been a load-bearing structure. It was just a rental. Her authority, her status, and her social standing were all a costume, bought with a dying man's life savings. Without the stolen millions, there was no foundation. There was only a small, terrified woman holding a silver shovel she did not own. She had focused so much on having wealth that she forgot to be a person of character. Take them, the lead marshal said. The sound of the handcuffs clicking around Stephanie's wrists was the most precise note I had ever heard. As they led her and Tyler out, past their horrified investors, I did not look back. I did not need to. The foundation of their lies had finally reached its stress point, and it was time for a new architect to take over. 6 months have passed since the day the foundation of Stephanie's world reached its stress point and finally collapsed. The headlines about the groundbreaking arrest have faded, replaced by cold court records detailing every cent they bled from a dying man's life savings. I stand on the wraparound porch of the main coastal mansion, watching the sunrise paint the Atlantic in shades of bruised purple and liquid gold. The house does not smell like cloying mayonnaise or the heavy scent of fake performance anymore. It smells like cedar, salt air, and the fresh ink on new blueprints. I have officially converted this property into Architects Haven. It is a non-profit studio dedicated to underfunded students who were told their visions were unrealistic junk. We provide the resources. My mother refused me the kind of solid foundation that keeps talent from falling through the cracks. The massive fortune Frank hid in that old passbook, the wealth Stephanie threw in the trash, now serves as a permanent endowment for students who have the skill but lack the means. My mother and brother are currently serving their time in federal prison. Stephanie still sends letters on lined yellow paper, long rambling messages full of blame and demands for family loyalty. I do not respond. I have learned that some doors, once closed, need to stay locked for the integrity of the structure. Tyler's hedge fund has been liquidated to pay back the $1,200,000 they laundered, and his reputation as the golden child has dissolved into a cautionary tale for his former investors. I go into the study and sit at Frank's desk. The clockwork box sits in the center, its gears now cleaned, and its hidden compartments empty of secrets. I ran a finger over the wood, realizing that this was my grandfather's ultimate design. He did not just leave me money, he left me a trial by fire that forced me to realize I was never a worthless burden or dead weight. I was the only one in the family who actually respected the math. The only one who knew that you cannot build a life on lies and expect it to stand. I have found a peace here that is not built on status or silver shovels. It is the quiet, rhythmic peace of a job well done. Frank was right. The truth is patient. It can wait longer than any lie. And in the end, it is the only thing that holds the weight. True legacy is not about the wealth you collect, but the cycle of abuse you break. If you have ever found the strength to walk away from a toxic dynamic and build your own foundation from the ruins, share your story below. Do not forget to follow for more tales of justice.